Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are doing something a little different. We're staring right into what is arguably the most fundamental and maybe the most controversial institution in all of human history.
It really is. It's the one thing everyone has an opinion on.
Why is that?
Well, mostly because literally everyone has one,
Yeah.
or at least came from one.
Exactly. We're talking about the family. But here's the question that really hooked me when I was going through the massive stack of research we have for today. Is the family dying? I mean, is it? Or is it just evolving into something we don't quite recognize yet? We all have this picture in our heads. Mom, dad, 2 kids, maybe a dog, the white picket fence.
The cereal box family. Yeah, that iconic image of stability.
Right. But when you really dig into the sociology, and we're talking about the heavy hitters today, Parsons, Murdock, but also the rebels like Artie Lang and David Cooper, you realize that definition is surprisingly slippery.
It is. And honestly, some of the sociological definitions are just downright shocking compared to that cereal box image. We're going to look at thinkers who see the family as a, quote, warm bath that soothes us from the brutality of capitalism.
Okay, a warm bath. I like that.
And then, on the other end, we have others who call it a gas chamber or a storehouse of stress.
A gas chamber. Wow. That's intense.
It is.
And we are definitely going to unpack why someone would use a metaphor that dark. But before we get into the warm baths and the gas chambers, we have a really critical mission to accomplish today. We are breaking down Chapter 9, System of Kinship, for our UPSC aspirants.
That's right. This isn't just theory for theory's sake. This is about building a rock-solid foundation for the exam. We're talking kinship, marriage, descent, patriarchy, all the big ones.
And we're going to laser focus on the past year questions, the PYQs, so you know exactly how to use this ammo in an exam hall. But first, a quick message for the community that makes this all possible. If you're finding value in this deep dive, and we really hope you are, we humbly ask you to subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel. It's where all the visual magic happens.
And if you are capable and you find this content super useful, please consider supporting the team on Patreon. It genuinely ensures the continued creation of this content.
We also just want to give a massive shout out to all our existing supporters. You folks are the reason we can sit here and do this, so thank you. And please don't forget to like the video version of this and share your valuable comments. We do read them.
Also, a quick notification, the free notes with practice PYQs are available on our public Telegram channel. You can just DM to join.
And for the really serious aspirants, there's a private Telegram library that gives you access to all the videos in this series at once, plus organized premium notes. And those premium notes have, everything, detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers.
It's the full package.
Okay, business handled. Let's get to the mission. Where do we even begin with a topic this huge?
We have to start at the bottom. The absolute building blocks. We have to start with kinship.
Okay, kinship. To me, before reading this packet, kinship just meant relatives. My cousins, my aunts, the people I see at weddings.
Right.
But in sociology, it seems like it's describing a system, maybe even a system of control, not just a family reunion.
That's a really great way to put it. Think of kinship as a web. It's a system of social organization that fundamentally defines who is us and who is them.
Okay.
It's not just about who sends you a birthday card. In traditional societies, and even in many parts of India today, kinship determines your entire existence. Everything.
Like what, specifically?
It determines who you can marry, who you have to give money to, who you can expect support from, and just as importantly, who you must avoid.
So it's like the operating system of society.
Exactly. It's the OS. And this operating system usually runs on 2 main types of code. Or you could say 2 types of bonds.
Okay, the first one I see here is consanguineal.
Right. The root word there, sanguine. It implies blood.
Yeah.
These are relationships based on descent. So parents, siblings, children, the biological link.
The vertical line up and down the family tree.
That's it. Though even that can get a little tricky because, adoption creates a consanguineal style bond without the actual blood.
Yeah.
But generally, yeah, it means descent.
Got it. And the second type is affinal.
Which is the horizontal line. Affinal, or you'll sometimes see it called conjugal, is based on marriage. So your spouse, your in-laws.
Right.
There's no blood connection, hopefully. But the social bond is incredibly strong. In fact, in a lot of societies, the bond you have with your in-laws is way more politically important than the bond you have with your own siblings.
Because that's where the alliances are made between families, between groups.
Precisely. But there was one concept in the notes that I found fascinating, and it's especially important for the Indian context: fictive kin.
I loved this. This is basically, bro, you're like a brother to me, but like taken seriously by sociologists.
In a way, yes. Fictive kin refers to relationships that aren't based on blood or marriage, but are treated with the same weight and the same ritual significance.
So you have to have an example for the exam.
The classic example you need to have in your pocket is S.C. Dubé's study of a village called Shamirpet.
Shamirpet.
Right.
Dubé found that in this village, people were crossing some pretty rigid social lines.
They really were. He found that unrelated individuals, sometimes even from different castes, would establish these ritual brotherhoods. They would perform a ceremony, and from that day forward, they behaved exactly like brothers.
So what does that mean, behaved like brothers?
It means they shared obligations, they supported each other in disputes, their families treated each other as relatives. It just goes to show that kinship is often a social choice, not just a biological accident.
That's a powerful distinction. It reminds me of the modern concept of chosen family in LGBTQ communities, which I think we'll touch on later. But it shows this isn't a new idea at all. Humans have always looked for ways to expand their us group.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's one more really useful distinction we need to make about this us group. It comes from a thinker named Raymond Firth.
Okay.
He distinguished between effective and non-effective kin.
Let me guess. Effective kin are the ones who actually help you move house, and non-effective kin are the ones who just show up for the free food at your wedding.
You're spot on. That's a perfect way to put it. Effective kin are the ones you have regular contact with, the ones you rely on for day-to-day survival or, psychological support.
And non-effective.
They're those distant cousins. They exist. You might see them once a decade at a funeral, but they play absolutely no functional role in your life structure.
So why does Firth bother making this distinction? I mean, why is it sociologically important?
Because structurally, on paper, they're both kin, but functionally, they're totally different. If you're a sociologist studying social support systems in a community, you only care about the effective kin. It bridges that gap between the formal rules of kinship and the messy practice of it.
I see. So why do we even have this web? I mean, in 2024, I rely on my job for money and the police for security. But historically, kinship did all of that.
Historically, kinship was everything. It was the government, the bank, and the insurance company, all rolled into one. It determined your rights and your obligations.
So in a tribal society, you don't call 911.
You call your lineage. Exactly.
Yeah.
It was also the primary unit of production. You worked the family land with your kin, and crucially, it determined marriage taboos. The kinship system tells you, very clearly, who you cannot marry.
The incest taboo.
Right, which is the fundamental rule for how society reproduces itself.
Yeah.
Without that kinship web, you just have social chaos.
Okay, so that's the web. Now let's zoom in on the spider at the center of the web, the family. The outline points to McIver and Page as the classic definition, guys.
They are the go-to textbook definition. McIver and Page argue the family has a few key features that distinguish it from, say, just a group of friends living together.
What are they?
First, universality. It's found in every single society we know of in some form.
Okay.
Second, an affective basis. It's rooted in emotion, in love, in psychological needs. Third, a limited size. It's smaller than a clan or a lineage. And fourth, social regulation. It's the place where we first learn the rules of society.
But wait a second. I remember reading about some early 19th century thinkers who claimed the family wasn't universal, that early humans lived in, what was the phrase, promiscuity.
Ah, yes. The evolutionary view. You're thinking of people like Morgan and Fraser. They were writing in the Victorian era, and they looked at indigenous tribes around the world.
And judged them.
And judged them, exactly.
Yeah.
They assumed that because these tribes didn't have strict Victorian morals, they must be living in a state of primitive promiscuity. They had this idea that the family evolved later as a sort of higher form of civilization.
That sounds a little racist, frankly.
It was deeply biased and, as we now know, largely incorrect. Modern sociology and anthropology have basically debunked it completely. The evidence suggests that some form of pairing and child-rearing unit has always existed. The primitive promiscuity idea was more of a colonial fantasy than actual science.
Got it. So family equals universal. But why? Why is it everywhere? This brings us to the functionalists. I call them the optimists of sociology because they seem to think everything exists for a good reason.
That's a fair label. Functionalists look at society like a human body. Every organ has a job. The heart pumps blood, the family pumps culture, and new members into society. And G.P. Murdock is the big name here.
He studied a massive number of societies, right?
A huge sample for his time, 250 of them. And based on that, He claimed the family is universal because it solves 4 essential problems that every single society has to face. If you don't solve these 4 problems, your society dies out.
Okay, let's run through them. Problem 1, sexual regulation.
You can't have a free-for-all. It would lead to constant conflict, jealousy, chaos. You need rules on who has sexual access to whom. The family provides that stable structure.
Makes sense. Problem 2, reproduction.
The obvious one. You need new citizens, new members, or the society goes extinct.
3, economic cooperation.
In Murdock's time and for most of human history, survival required the division of labor. He argued that the family, with men and women performing different but complementary tasks, is the most efficient unit for food production, shelter, and just basic living.
And finally, number 4, socialization.
Teaching the new generation the rules, the norms, the values. If you don't socialize your kids, you don't have a society. You have Lord of the Flies.
So Murdock basically says the family is the Swiss Army knife of social institutions. It does everything.
Pretty much. But then comes Talcott Parsons, and he's writing a bit later, in modern industrial America.
Yeah.
And he sees the family changing, right? He sees us doing less.
How?
Exactly. Parsons has this brilliant insight. He sees that the family is losing its old jobs. We don't farm at home anymore. We go to offices. We don't educate our kids entirely at home. We have schools. The state provides welfare. So the family is shedding functions.
Okay.
But Parsons says it retains 2 basic and irreducible functions. 2 things that only the family can do effectively.
Okay, function 1, primary socialization.
This is about turning a biological organism, a baby, into a human being. It's about molding the personality, teaching language, basic norms. It's like formatting the hard drive of a new computer.
And function 2 is my favorite image in all of sociology, the warm bath theory.
The stabilization of adult personality is such a vivid image, isn't it? Parsons argued that modern industrial life is incredibly stressful. It's competitive, it's impersonal, it's cold. It just grinds you down every day.
I think we can all relate to that.
Right. So the husband, and it was always the husband in his model, comes home from the brutal capitalist workplace, and the family acts like a warm bath.
It soothes him. It distresses him.
It relieves his stress. It recharges his emotional batteries, and it sends him back out the next day, ready to be a productive worker for the system.
It sounds nice. I mean, who doesn't want a warm bath? But I can already hear the critics sharpening their knives.
Oh, well.
Because not everyone experiences the family as a warm bath. For many, that water is freezing cold, or maybe it's scalding hot.
Absolutely. And this is where we pivot to the conflict or critical perspectives, the skeptics, and they do not hold back. Let's start with the Marxists, specifically Friedrich Engels.
Engels didn't think the family was primarily about love, did he?
Not at all. For Engels, the rise of the monogamous nuclear family is all about one thing: property.
How does he make that connection?
He traces it back to the origin of private property. He argued that as men began to accumulate wealth herds of cattle, plots of land, they became obsessed with a new problem: how to pass it to their own biological sons, not the clan's children, their sons.
So they needed to be 100% sure that the son was theirs.
Exactly. And to ensure paternity, they had to enforce strict monogamy on women. They had to control women's sexuality. So for Engels, the family isn't a love nest. It's a mechanism to perpetuate class inequality and control the inheritance of private property.
So it's not a warm bath, it's a bank vault.
A bank vault built on the oppression of women. And the feminists pick up this thread and run with it. Take a Marxist feminist like Margaret Benston. She argues the family supports capitalism not just through inheritance, but by providing a massive amount of unpaid labor.
This is the cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing argument, the invisible work.
It is. And it's a powerful argument. Think about it. If a factory owner had to pay for his workers to be fed, clothed, emotionally soothed, and for the next generation of workers to be raised from scratch, his profits would just plummet.
Right.
The family, and specifically the woman within it, does all that work for free. Benston has a famous phrase for this. She calls women the slaves of the slaves.
Ouch, that hits hard. The worker is a slave to the boss, and the wife is a slave to the worker.
Precisely. But the critique gets even darker. We have the critical thinkers like David Cooper and Edmund Leach. They look at the psychological toll the family takes.
Cooper wrote a book called The Death of the Family. That's not a subtle title.
No, it is not. He calls the family an ideological conditioning device. He basically believes it's a factory for producing conformity. It crushes our individual freedom, our creativity, our true selves, all to make us obedient little workers who follow rules and don't question authority. He sees the family as a mental prison.
And then there's Edmund Leach. He had that famous line about the runaway world.
Yes. Leach looked at Parsons' isolated nuclear family, just mom, dad, and the kids, cut off from the grandparents and cousins and the wider community. And he said, this isn't a warm bath, this is a pressure cooker.
That pressure cooker.
He called it a storehouse of stress. He argued that because the modern nuclear family is so isolated, so private, the members have no one else to turn to. Parents and children demand far too much emotionally from each other. They, in his words, take too much out of each other.
It's like an electrical circuit with too much voltage running through it. Eventually, it just blows.
Exactly. And it's a direct attack on Parsons. Parsons sees that isolation is efficient for capitalism. Leach sees it as a recipe for neurosis, conflict, and misery.
That feels incredibly relevant to modern discussions about burnout and the pressures of parenting. We are so isolated.
For sure.
But let's look at the structures themselves. We mentioned Parsons' isolated nuclear family. He thought this was the perfect fit for industrial society. Why exactly?
Two main reasons. First, geographic mobility. Industrial society needs workers who can move. If a new factory opens in Detroit, you need people to be able to move to Detroit.
And you can't do that if you're tied to a joint family of 40 people in a plot of ancestral land.
You can't. But if you're a small, nimble unit of 4, you can pack up and go. The second reason is social mobility. In industrial society, your status is supposed to be achieved, not ascribed. It's about what you can do, not who your father is. The isolated family breaks those tight bonds with the extended kin group, making individual achievement the priority.
Okay, so that's the functionalist take. But then we have Young and Wilmot. They looked at the British family over time and saw a new stage evolving, the symmetrical family.
This is a crucial concept for your answers, a really important one. Young and Wilmot argued that the family has evolved into a stage 3 type. It's becoming more symmetrical.
Now, does that mean men and women do the exact same things, like 50-50 on the chores?
No. And that's a common misconception people have. It doesn't mean the roles are identical. It means they are balanced and more shared. It's a home-centered family. The husband isn't just going out to the pub with the boys every night while the wife stays home.
They spend their leisure time together.
Together, exactly. And decisions are shared. The husband isn't the sole dictator of the household. He's a partner. The roles are different, but equally valued.
It sounds very modern, very ideal. But is it true? Or is it just, a nice idea?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? Feminists like Ann Oakley would come back and argue that even in a supposedly symmetrical family, a woman is still doing the majority of the laundry and the emotional heavy lifting. But Young and Wilmot were definitely identifying a real shift away from the rigid, segregated roles of the past.
There's one more thinker on structure that I think is maybe the most useful for a modern exam question. David Morgan and his idea of family practices.
Yes. If you remember one thing from this whole section on changing structures, remember this. Morgan says, we need to stop looking at the family as a static thing, as a noun. We need to start looking at it as a verb.
Family is a verb. What does that even mean?
It means family is what we do. It's the activity. It's the Sunday dinner you always have. It's the family group chat that's constantly buzzing. It's who you call when you have a flat tire at 2 a.m.
So it's about the actions, not the labels.
Precisely. Morgan argues that in the modern world, structures are just too fluid. You might have a nuclear family on paper, but if you never talk to them and you rely entirely on your roommate for support, care, and everything else, then your roommate is part of your family practice.
This moves sociology from studying structure, who lives under what roof, to studying relationships, who cares for whom, who supports whom.
Exactly. And for an exam answer about changing patterns of kinship, this idea is pure gold. It helps explain why close friends can be family, why coworkers can sometimes feel like family, and why the traditional rigid definitions are just breaking down.
This leads us perfectly into segment 3, which is a distinction I think trips up a lot of students, the difference between household and family. Because in casual conversation, we use them completely interchangeably. Who's in your household just means who is your family.
Right, but sociologically, they are completely different concepts. A family is defined by those emotional bonds and kinship ties, that web we talked about at the start. A household is defined by commensality and residence.
Commensality. That's a fancy word for eating together, right?
Yeah, literally eating from the same hearth. Sharing a kitchen, living under the same roof. It's a residential and economic unit.
Okay, let's test this with some examples. If I live with 3 roommates in Bangalore, are we a family?
No. You are a household. You share a roof and maybe a kitchen, but you lack the kinship tie. You're not related by blood or marriage.
Okay. And what about a man who works in Mumbai, sending money back to his wife and his parents who live in a village in Bihar?
They were one single family, but they were split across two separate households. This is the classic mismatch that is so incredibly common in migrant economies like India.
And we have to talk about A.M. Shah here. The outline says he totally revolutionized how we look at Indian households.
He really did. Before Shah, everyone in sociology was obsessed with this one question. Is the joint family dying? Shah came along and said, wait, you're asking the wrong question. You're looking at it all wrong.
What was his insight?
He argued that households go through a developmental cycle, a process.
Like a life cycle.
Exactly. A household isn't a static thing. It might start as simple, just a husband and wife, then they have children. Then one of their sons gets married and brings his wife into the home. Now it's complex or joint.
Okay, so it grows.
It grows, but then maybe the old father dies and the brothers decide to split up and form their own separate units. The household then becomes simple again.
So just because you see a nuclear household when you're doing your survey today, it doesn't mean the joint family is dead. It might just be in a different phase of the cycle.
Precisely. It's a process, not a fixed date. That is a critical, high-level point to make in any mains answer on the Indian family.
Okay, let's talk about the institution that typically starts the family, marriage. We defined it earlier as a socially approved union. But Edmund Leach, our storehouse of stress guy, he had some issues with defining marriage too, didn't he?
He did. Leach argued that if you try to make one single, universal definition of marriage that fits every tribe in the Amazon and every modern society in Europe, you'll fail. It's impossible.
Why? Because the purpose is different everywhere.
Exactly. Because the rights that marriage confers vary so wildly. In some cultures, marriage is primarily about establishing the legal father of a child. In others, it's about getting a monopoly over the sexuality of the partner. In still others, it's purely about getting rights to the partner's labor, extra pair of hands for the farm. Leach said you can't box all of that into one tidy definition.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's look at the types, because the exam loves these specific terms. Monogamy versus polygamy.
Okay, so monogamy is one-to-one, one spouse at a time. Polygamy is the big umbrella term for having many spouses.
And under that umbrella?
You have polygyny, which is one man with multiple wives. This is historically very common across the world. And then you have polyandry.
Which is one woman with multiple husbands.
Right. This is much rarer, but it's famous in sociology. The classic examples are the Todas of South India and the Khasas of the Jamsar Bawa region in the Himalayas. And often, it's a specific type called fraternal polyandry.
Meaning a woman marries a set of brothers.
Exactly. And the reason is usually economic. It's to keep the family's land from being divided up among the sons.
That's pure economics driving culture. Now what about the rules of who you can marry? Endogamy versus exogamy.
Endogamy means marrying within your group. In India, caste is the classic example of an endogamous group. Religion is also usually endogamous. Exogamy means you must marry outside your group. Your gotra, or clan, is exogamous. In many parts of North India, your village is also exogamous. You're not supposed to marry a neighbor.
And then there's the status game, hypergamy and hypogamy.
Right. Hypergamy, which in the Indian context is called anuloma, is when a woman marries up in status. A lower caste woman marrying a higher caste man, for instance. This is traditionally allowed, sometimes even preferred. Hypogamy, or pratyloma, is the reverse, a woman marrying down. And traditionally, this was strictly forbidden and often severely punished.
And finally, the ultimate rule that governs all of this, the incest taboo.
The one true universal. Every single society bans sexual relations between close kin. But the real sociological question is, how do you define close?
Because it's not the same everywhere.
Not at all. And this is a fantastic point of comparison. In North India, cross-cousin marriage, that is, marrying your mother's brother's daughter, is often seen as incestuous. You're considered to share blood. It's taboo. But in South India,
it's the preferred match.
It's the gold standard. It's not incest. It's the ideal marriage. Which brings us perfectly to segment 4, lineage and descent. Because this North versus South divide is the biggest theme here.
Before we get to the comparison, let's clarify the terms. What's the difference between lineage and descent? They sound the same.
They're related, but different. A lineage is a specific group where you can actually trace your genealogical links back to a common known ancestor. You can name the grandfather, the great-grandfather, step by step. It's concrete. Descent is the broader principle. It refers to the social rule of tracing membership, often going back to a mythical ancestor or even a totem. You can't name every step on the chain, but you know you belong to that line.
Got it. And what are the main principles of descent?
The most common is unilineal, which means you trace your group membership through only one parent's line. Under that, you have patrilineal through the father. This is the most common form in the world and dominant in India. And you have matrilineal through the mother. The Kasis in Meghalaya and the Nairs in Kerala are the classic Indian examples. Your identity and property pass through the female line.
But there are some weirder ones too, right? Like double descent?
Yes, or bilineal. It's rare, but fascinating. The Yako tribe in Nigeria is the textbook example. They trace some things, like movable property and ritual roles through the mother's line, and other things like land and residence through the father's line. So you actually belong to two different lineages simultaneously for different purposes.
Wow, that sounds complicated. What about ambilineal?
That's sort of the choose-your-own-adventure of descent systems. You have the choice to affiliate with either your mother's side or your father's side, and you usually choose based on who has more political power, land, or influence. It's flexible.
Okay, let's go back to that North versus South India comparison. This is a staple for the exam, you said.
It is. In North India, the kinship system is huge and sprawling. Because of village exogamy, the rule that you have to marry outside your own village, your kin, are spread over hundreds of miles. There's also a very clear hierarchy. The bride givers, the wife's family, are considered to be of a lower status than the bride takers, the husband's family. You always give respect up to your in-laws.
So the in-laws are automatically superior.
Correct. The relationship is unequal. But in South India, because of the preference for cross-cousin marriage, you are often marrying back into a family you already know very well. The network is tighter, smaller, more localized.
And what about the hierarchy?
Because you are exchanging women back and forth over generations, my son marries your son marries my daughter, the relationship is much more equal. It's ithogamy, equal status, rather than hypergamy.
So to put it simply, in the North, marriage spreads the net wide to create new alliances. In the South, it tightens the knot of existing alliances.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Absolutely perfect.
I try. Now, we have to talk about the power dynamic that underpins almost all of this. Segment 5, patriarchy and the sexual division of labor. Because you really can't talk about family without talking about power.
This is a heavy section, but it's absolutely critical. And for the exam, we need a solid academic definition of patriarchy. The scholar you must cite here is Sylvia Walby.
Okay, what's her definition?
She moves beyond just vague ideas of male dominance. Walby defines patriarchy as a system of social structures and practices in which men dominate, oppress, and exploit women.
The key word there is system. It's not just about individual attitudes.
Exactly. It's structural. And to explain this, she breaks it down into our famous 6 structures of patriarchy.
Household production. This is women doing the unpaid domestic labor we talked about.
Paid work, the wage gap, the glass ceiling, job segregation where women get stuck in certain types of jobs.
Okay.
3, the state. How laws and government policies can implicitly or explicitly favor men.
Male violence. She argues this isn't just random acts by bad individuals, but a systematic form of control.
Sexuality. The classic double standards. Men are praised for being sexually active. Women are shamed.
Culture. How media, religion, and education all reinforce these gendered roles.
That covers basically every aspect of life. It's a total system. But there's a concept here that adds so much nuance to this, which I found fascinating. The patriarchal bargain. This is from Dinesh Kandiyoti.
This concept is crucial because it helps explain a puzzle. Why do some women seem to support and uphold patriarchy? Why does the mother-in-law, for example, often treat the new daughter-in-law so harshly?
Right, the classic Sas-Bahu conflict in India.
Exactly. Kandiyoti argues that women, lacking direct power, operate strategically within the patriarchal system to maximize their own security and long-term influence. In a classic joint family, a young bride has zero power. She's at the absolute bottom of the hierarchy.
So she has to find a way to survive.
Right. And if she plays by the rules, if she is obedient, if she produces sons, she gradually rises in status and power. When she eventually becomes a mother-in-law herself, she finally gets to exercise power. But it's over other women, her daughters-in-law.
So she upholds the system because she's waiting for her turn to be in charge.
Precisely. She makes a bargain with patriarchy. She accepts subservience now for a promise of power and security later. It's a survival strategy, not necessarily a conscious choice.
That is fascinating and also incredibly tragic. Now let's talk about the division of labor that comes from this. Who does the dishes and why? Some thinkers say it's just biology.
Right, the biological determinist theories. You have Tiger and Fox who talk about a human biogrammar. They argue that men are hardwired to be hunters, aggressive, outgoing, and women are hardwired to be reproducers, nurturing, domestic because of millions of years of evolution.
So it's in our DNA.
That's their argument. Murdock and Parsons also lean this way. They argued it's just more efficient for society if men take the instrumental role as leaders and providers, and women take the expressive role as nurturers and healers.
But the feminists disagree vigorously.
Of course. The key thinker for the counterargument is Anne Oakley. Her book is called The Housewife. She argues very forcefully that gender is a social construct. There is no gene for washing dishes.
And she looked at history to prove this, right?
Yes. Her historical analysis is devastating to the biological argument. She points out that in pre-industrial societies, labor was often shared. Women worked the fields just like men did. The very idea of the housewife, a woman whose entire identity is based on domestic work, is actually a modern invention of industrialization. It's not ancient, it's recent.
And what about Bruno Bettelheim? How does he fit in?
He studied the kibbutz system in Israel. In a traditional kibbutz, children were raised communally in children's houses by trained caregivers, not exclusively by their biological mothers.
So the mother wasn't the 24/7 caregiver.
Not at all. And guess what? The kids turned out perfectly fine. This was a direct challenge to the functionalist idea, pushed by Parsons, that an intense, exclusive bond with the biological mother is essential for a child to grow up healthy.
So biology isn't destiny. But here's the kicker. Even when women enter the workforce today, in massive numbers, they don't seem to escape the housework.
Oh, yeah, they don't. And this leads to the concept of the second shift, coined by the sociologist Arlie Hochschild. Women go to their paid job. That's shift number one. They come home, and instead of getting Parsons' warm bath, they start cooking, cleaning, and helping the kids with homework. That's shift number two. It's the dual burden.
Which connects right back to Sylvia Walby's first structure of patriarchy, household production.
Exactly. You see, it's all connected in a system.
This brings us to the most practical part of our deep dive. Segment 6, Mains Answer Building. We are going to look at actual PYQs, past year questions, from the UPSC exams. This is where the rubber really meets the road. So here's how we'll do this. I'm going to read the question and the directive word, and you give me the meat, the key facts and thinkers. Then I'll try to structure a high-scoring answer.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay, PYQ 1, this is from 2023. How do you assess the changing patterns in kinship relations in societies today? The key directive here is assess.
Right. Assess means you can't just list the changes. You have to weigh the evidence, evaluate the significance. It's a higher order task. So the meat for this answer, you have to start with the broad shift from obligation to choice. So the meat for this answer. You should cite Giddens on confluent love, the idea that relationships last only as long as they are emotionally satisfying, not forever out of a sense of duty. So the meat for this answer, you have to mention modern reproductive technology surrogacy, IVF. These things challenge our very definition of biological kinship. So the meat for this answer. And crucially, you bring in David Morgan's idea of family practices. Kinship is becoming more fluid, defined by what we do. So the meat for this answer. And finally, you could mention the weakening of the patriarchal bargain as women gain economic independence and have more choices.
Okay, fantastic. So the structure for a top-tier answer would be something like this. 1. Introduction. You'd state that kinship is shifting from a rigid, ascribed structure to a much more fluid, achieved process in late modernity. 2. Body paragraph 1. Talk about the structural changes. Mention nuclearization, sure, but add nuance with the concept of the modified extended family from Litwack, where we live apart but stay deeply connected through technology like video calls and digital payments. 3. Body paragraph 2. Then functional changes. Kinship is less about economic survival and production, and more about emotional support and consumption. 4. Body paragraph 3. You have to talk about the new forms. Live-in relationships, single-parent households, LGBTQ plus families, which are often called families of choice. 5. Conclusion. You conclude by assessing that kinship isn't disappearing at all. It's just becoming more diverse, more individualistic, and a good term to use would be filiocentric, child-centered.
Perfect. Using a specific term like filiocentric at the end is exactly what separates a good answer from a great one.
Okay, PYQ 2, also from 2023. Analyze critically David Morgan's views on family practices. The directive is analyze critically.
So this means you have to explain the concept, but then you also have to show its weaknesses, its limitations. The meat here. First, explain the idea. Morgan shifts sociology from the family as a noun, a thing, to family practices as a verb, an activity. The meat here. The pros of this view. It brilliantly captures the fluidity and reality of modern life. It helps us understand how a roommate can be more family than an estranged uncle. The critique, the critical part, is key. You have to ask, if everything can be a family practice, does the concept lose all meaning? And more importantly, does focusing on these micro-level practices make us ignore the hard structural realities of class and gender inequality that Marxists and feminists talk about? If you just look at doing family, you might miss the patriarchy that's still shaping those actions.
Right, so the structure would be 1. Intro. Define Morgan's sociological shift from a focus on structure to a focus on practice. 2. Body. Explain the concept in detail. Family is constructed through daily auctions and relationships, caregiving, sharing meals, providing support. 3. Critical analysis. Acknowledge its strengths. It's flexible. It captures diversity. But its weakness is that it risks ignoring the persistent power structures, like Walby's 6 structures, that still exist within these so-called practices. 4. Conclusion. Conclude that it's a necessary and valuable evolution in sociological theory for understanding the modern world, even if it has to be supplemented with a structural analysis of power. Let's do another, PYQ3 from 2022. Explain the implications of feminization of work in developing societies.
Okay, implications. You need to talk about the consequences, both positive and negative.
The big positive implication is that it directly challenges the patriarchal bargain. Economic independence for women equals more power, more agency. This often leads to delayed marriage and lower fertility rates. The negative implications. The dual burden we talked about from Hochschild. The second shift. Also the problem of pink-collar ghettoization women getting stuck in low-paying, precarious service sector jobs. The impact on the family structure itself. It encourages neo-local residences as couples are no longer economically dependent on the joint family. It can also lead to a potential rise in divorce rates. Nikki Hart calls this providing women with opportunities to escape bad marriages.
Okay, so a good structure would be 1. Intro. Define the feminization of work, the increasing participation of women in the paid labor force. 2. Body paragraph 1. Discuss the implications for women themselves. Frame it as empowerment versus exploitation. Talk about financial independence on one hand and the second shift on the other. 3. Body paragraph 2. Discuss the implications for the family structure. The breakdown of joint family dependence, the rise of commuter marriages where couples live apart for work. 4. Conclusion. Your final judgment is that it's a double-edged sword. It's liberating for many women, but it also brings new forms of stress and exploitation, especially without adequate structural support from the state or from men in the household. Okay, PYQ4 from 2021. Define patriarchy. How does patriarchy manifest in interpersonal relations?
This is a great question because it asks you to connect big theory to everyday life.
For the definition, you must use Sylvia Walby, the system of domination, oppression, and exploitation. For the interpersonal manifestations part, this is key. Don't just talk about laws or the economy. You have to talk about what happens in the living room. Mention benevolent sexism, the idea of protecting women because they are seen as weak, which is still a form of control. Talk about control over finances, control over her mobility, who she can visit, who her friends are. You can also bring in Anne Oakley's analysis of the housewife role here, the interpersonal expectation that a wife will provide personal, emotional, and domestic service to her husband.
So the structure would look like this. 1. Intro. Start with Walby's powerful systemic definition of patriarchy. 2. Body. Break down the manifestations. First, in decision-making. The husband as the carta or head of the family having the final say. Second, in emotional labor. The expectation that women must manage the emotions of the household and provide that warm bath service to men. Third, in control and violence, ranging from subtle control of choices to overt domestic abuse. 3. Conclusion. Conclude by saying that patriarchy isn't just an abstract concept found in parliaments or boardrooms. It's a powerful force that shapes our most intimate interpersonal relationships every single day. Last one for this segment, PYQ5 from 2018. Distinguish between family and household with reference to the concept of development of the household.
This is a direct knowledge-based question. First, the distinction. Family is based on emotion and kinship. Household is based on commensality and residence. Give an example of each. Then, the development concept. This is your cue to bring in A.M. Shah. Explain a cycle. A household isn't a static binary of nuclear versus joint. It develops over time. A simple or nuclear household becomes complex or joint when a son brings a wife home. It might later become simple again when the father dies and the brothers split.
Got it. A very straightforward structure for this one. 1. Intro. Provide crystal clear definitions of family versus household. 2. Body. Explain A.M. Shah's developmental cycle in detail, using the terms simple and complex Show how a household's form changes over its life cycle. 3. Conclusion. Your concluding thought should be that we cannot understand the reality of the Indian family without looking at this developmental process of the household. It prevents us from making the false and simplistic claim that the joint family is dead.
You nailed those structures. That's exactly how you approach these questions. You introduce the concept, you bring in the right thinkers, you add a layer of analysis, and you connect it to the contemporary Indian context. That is how you score high in mains.
Okay, so let's wrap this entire deep dive up with some final concluding takeaways. If our listener has to remember, say, 5 key names from this entire discussion to put on their flashcards, who should they be?
Okay, your top 5. 1. G.P. Murdock. For the 4 universal functions of the family: sexual, reproductive, economic, and educational. The Functionalist baseline. 2. Talcott Parsons. The warm bath and the isolated nuclear family. The key theorist for the family and industrial society. 3. Anne Oakley. The feminist counter-argument. Biology is not destiny. The housewife role is a social construct. 4. Sylvia Walby. For the definitive 6-structure definition of patriarchy, you must know this. 5. And for the Indian context, A.M. Shah, and his concept of the developmental cycle of the household.
Perfect. And for the mains insight, that golden nugget of analysis to differentiate an answer from the rest.
I would say it's this. Never, ever view the Indian family as static. It is a dynamic blend. It's tradition like the continued prevalence of arranged marriage meeting modernity, like the use of matrimonial apps. It's the joint family ideal surviving within nuclear households through technology, what we call the modified extended family. Always connect your answer to the broader changes happening in society: legal reforms, economic shifts, and globalization.
And on that note, here is my final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We talked about how the family has been losing its functions over time. Schools now teach our kids. Hospitals cure the sick. The state is supposed to provide pensions and Social Security.
Yeah.
So if the family loses all of its practical, instrumental functions, it's no longer a unit of production or education or even welfare, what is left? Is it just Parsons' warm bath? And if the water in that bath goes cold, what happens to society then?
That is the big question, isn't it? Perhaps that's why there's so much anxiety about the family today. We're all trying to figure out what it's for when it's no longer strictly about survival.
Something to think about. Before we go, a final friendly reminder. Please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PTP on YouTube. It really does help the channel grow.
And if you can, consider supporting the team on Patreon. It keeps these super useful deep dives coming your way.
A huge, huge shout out to all our supporters. You guys are absolute legends. And for everyone listening, please like the video, leave a comment. Tell us, do you think the family is a warm bath or a pressure cooker? We'd love to know.
And don't forget the free notes and PYQs on the public Telegram channel. For the whole organized stash, you can get access to the premium library via DM.
You are now fully equipped to tackle Chapter 9. Go forth and conquer. We'll see you in the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.